My name is Kéline Milliard, if you're just arriving. I'm thrilled to be here to introduce this panel entitled Patronage as a Force for Change, which will be immediately followed by a panel on curators called Curating Dissented. For this very first panel, we're extremely lucky to have the one and only Joel Wachs, who is the president of the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts in New York, and is in conversation with Ann Goldstein, the Deputy Director and Senior Curator at Large at the Art Institute of Chicago. So please join me in giving Joel and Ann a very warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you. Great to be here. Welcome, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be able to sit here with Joel, who's, besides an esteemed colleague in our field, a very dear friend. So it's a fireside chat. Maybe we'll get into bickering too. But to add a little bit more to Colleen's introduction, Joel is really kind of a force in our field for many, many years. It's been a lifetime of service to communities, artists, institutions, and organizations. And when I first knew him in Los Angeles, he was an LA City councilman for 30 years, a trustee of the Museum of Contemporary Art, where I was working at the time. And then for the last nearly 25 years, he's been the president of the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts. He's also been a board member of the Tiger Foundation in New York, and a friend to so many artists, colleagues, people in our community for so many years. Just a really esteemed person. We owe you immense gratitude. So a few things. Joel told me what he wanted to talk about today, which makes my life very easy. And the first thing, of course, is the Warhol Foundation. And just to tee it off, the Warhol Foundation is an extraordinary artist-endowed foundation. And you're seeing, I think, on this slide, some images of different projects that have been supported by Warhol. We can see them here. And I wanted to ask Joel just about the foundation. It has an incredibly brief and profoundly important mission statement, which is the advancement of the visual arts, which was actually in Warhol's will. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Joel. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ann, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. Well, the story of Andy's philanthropy is a pretty remarkable one. I think it's becoming clear, at least in the United States, where most of the funds have been spent, he's becoming as known for his philanthropy as for his art. And it was an interesting story. I don't think anyone ever expected that when he went into New York Hospital at the age of 58 for a routine gallbladder operation, he would never come out. But that was the case. And just, I guess to a lot of people's surprise, they found a will. And the will said he left a small amount of money to his two brothers. And he said, I leave everything I own, including all of my art, everything, to a foundation to be created to support the visual arts. And from that one incredible action that he took has come a remarkable foundation of probably now the leading foundation of cutting-edge contemporary art predominantly in the United States. We don't ask or take money from anyone. We live on what Andy left us. We sell his art, we license his name and his image, we invest the proceeds, and 100% of the proceeds go to supporting the arts. At this point now, we give away about $18 million a year in cash grants. We've given away over $400 million altogether in the United States. We've given away 52,000 works of art, that's true, to 321 museums. It sounds like a lot, but when he died, he left over 100,000 works of art. They didn't call it factory for nothing. And it's spent on a select group of grant programs, all of them competitive. Exhibitions for the larger institutions, single-person exhibitions. I think I saw one of the flashing on the board here now, which was the the Vaginal Davis retrospective at the Moderna Museet in Stockholm recently. A huge program on arts writing, where we give grants both to individual writers, from extended essays to blogs to books, to nonprofit arts publications as well. Our biggest focus is on the smaller, community-based, artist-centered organizations in all 50 states, urban and rural alike, throughout America, red states, blue states, where the real creative, cutting-edge activity, not the kind of thing you read about in Phillips and Christie's and Sotheby's, but the real troops on the ground, the real aesthetic forces. That is one of our most primary areas of interest, both in terms of the organizations that support artists in these communities and the artists themselves through a re-granting program of small grants to individual artists in all 50 states. And then primarily, I think, though, that I could go on and we do this, and this. Probably as important as what we do, I think, are the values that underline all of our activities. I mean, the artist is first and foremost. The organizations that support the artist is our next focus. But diversity, experimentation, controversy, things that upset people, things that may not be, especially today, politically accepted, those are the things we primarily we support. An unabiding commitment to freedom of expression. I mean, for the arts to be free, to succeed, they have to be free, and I think that underlies what even made Andy Warhol himself such a successful artist. So we do all of these things in his name, and it's a pretty remarkable story that an artist that was known for his art and the persona and the life he lived, in one sense, left this remarkable body of his assets to be used solely and completely to support the visual arts.
It's incredible, and I know that there's also been, I can't remember if you said the art writing program that Creative Capital also supports, so all the different kind of aspects of the ecosystem of art. I think it's also interesting to note when you mentioned the Moderna Museet and Vaginal Davis, that Warhol, I think, is one of the few American foundations that supports initiatives and programs, or just programs or exhibitions outside of the United States.
Well, primarily it is the United States, and that was a board decision early on before I became the president. That was a board decision primarily because historically in America there's much less government support for the arts than there's been, for example, in Europe and in other places where there was more of a tradition of government support. So the board at that time decided that the money should go to American institutions, but the art that they would support would be global, would be international. But we've always made exceptions because Vaginal Davis is a perfect example. She's a very, very important figure in America, an important part of America's culture, and yet no American museum has been willing.
An American artist living in Berlin.
Now living in Berlin, but we knew from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And when no one would step in, we did.
No, it's great. It's great. And I think also the support for individual artists is also something that's complicated for foundations in the United States because they can't necessarily support, you can't give the money directly, but you give it to these intermediary organizations, and then it's their decision. So you also don't really have in many cases you have the decisions over direct support, and in other cases you leave it to other colleagues to make those decisions.
Well, because other people can often do it better than we can. And right now, I just saw a picture come out here on the screen of a demonstration. It's a perfect example. That is representing a new grantee that we've just given a grant to called Artists at Risk Connection. Artists at Risk Connection is a new organization, came out of PEN America historically, but is now in the United States, trying to help the artists who are most at risk now from the draconian immigration policies that our government has perpetuated. It gives legal advice to immigrants. It gives relocation assistance if they need. It gives connections to any of the social service organizations that they can be supporting them. We say that's a kind of a grant that others out there that are committed to freedom of expression and supporting the undocumented artists that are now really under terrible threat now in America. So we've given them a tremendous grant, and we're going to continue to support them and all the other efforts that are trying to counter the draconian efforts that are now taking place in our country.
I know we're going to talk a little more about that later, but I wanted to segue into another foundation that you're involved in as a board member, which is the Tiger Foundation in New York. And it has a distinctive approach because it's very curator-oriented. David Tiger, the founder, was very supportive of curators in the field and wanted to empower them and give them greater agency as well. But I know that you've been involved since the very beginning. Maybe you can talk about that.
Well, when David was alive, he had a small foundation of 5 people, himself and 4 others. He had asked me to be on it because he was interested in giving grants in the field while he was alive. We didn't know, though, that he was going to leave everything he owned, all the art that he owned eventually when he passed away, to create the kind of foundation we now have. What David saw, if he was looking at Warhol as a role model for other artists to create artist-centered foundations as well. And he saw that the success of the Warhol Foundation was instrumental in encouraging other artists to do something comparable. And there are a lot of now, in America, artist-centered foundations are one of the greatest support for the arts. The Frankenthaler Foundation, the Joan Mitchell Foundation, Paula Krasner Foundation, all of this.
Yeah.
Rauschenberg, fantastic. And David, interestingly, has, I think, creating another model where something very similar can happen for collectors. Obviously, collectors, here we are at an art fair, collectors buy and sell art and do what they want with art and all. But there are people like David, who was an avid collector, who decided that he wanted some of his art to go to museums that he promised it to, but all the rest of it to go, in his case, he wanted to support curators. He believed strongly in curators. And so he left all of his art, which was monetized, into an endowment. We hired a fantastic person to run the foundation, Larissa Harris. The board has now gone from 4 to 6 because we're kind of going global, and we added Yasmin Round and Zoe Whitley on the board. And it has been set up now to support individual curators, who have really exciting proposals that otherwise might not get realized. Another award effort is supporting curators with programs dealing with climate change. And my goal now is that I would love to see Tiger be a role model for other collectors in the same way that Andy has been a role model for other artists to create foundations and to use their resources to support the greater arts world. I think that the Tiger Foundation will surely become a role model for other collectors who would like to do the same thing, and that would be a tremendous benefit for the art community.
Yes. No, it's incredible. I mean, this is a very American context situation. Does Tiger also support initiatives outside of the United States, or is it?
Yes, Tiger is actually, the Tiger board is actually intentionally wanting to become a global.
And if I understand it, because when you say supporting curators, but is it more their exhibition projects? Are there certain types of projects that it supports?
It's primarily exhibitions. It's curatorial research, and in that sense, Warhol has a curatorial research program as well for research that is hard to otherwise fund. From that may or may not come an exhibition or other thing, but from the curatorial standpoint, it's research, and then it's exhibitions pursuant to the research that has taken place, and then enabling, and then it's also some support for the artists themselves to help them.
That's great. That's great. So back to the situation in the United States and and how there's such a desire to try to do something and try to resist and challenge the situation and find ways to support under incredible duress, and institutions that every day we hear, something else happening and somebody else forced to resign and programs under threat. What I know that the Warhol Foundation has been thinking about this and actually involved in some initiatives, including with the war.
We have been, and it's just the beginning. It's only 5 months now in America, but there is a determined effort on the part of the current administration to basically erase a culture, and you can't do that. It won't work anyway because you can never, you won't be able to. But so many people will be hurt along the way from the efforts to try to eradicate a culture. And that culture that is reflected in diversity and equity and inclusion, that's reflected in controversy and in experimentation, that's all we do. All of our grants, everything is DEI. Everything is when is now trying to be, and it's they've gone after it in a number of ways. They've cut out the grants of any monies to organizations if they feel that the money will go towards programs which would be what they would call DEI. They're going after the tax-exempt status. They're going after the endowments of nonprofits. They're really making a concerted effort to try to really eliminate, to erase a culture, which is only, I hope, in the end, going to result in a culture that's even more vibrant, more active, make more work in response to what's going on. But there's a lot of pain along the way and suffering. So we've had 2 meetings now to try to figure out what we as just one foundation can do. And I think the very first thing we decided above everything else is we're not going to change doing anything we do. We're not going to change what we do. We're not going to change the way we talk about it and try to, eliminate the magic words and all that. No, we're going to do what we do. We're going to say what it is. We're going to defend it if it's attacked. We'll go to, whether it's legally in court or otherwise, and we'll do it the best we can. And we feel that doing that in and of itself is a major thing that everyone in their own capacity can do. And we hope that by doing it and by being public about it, will hopefully encourage others who might be somewhat hesitant or fearful to do the same. Then we said beyond that, then we say, well, maybe there's some concrete things beyond that, although to me that's as concrete as could be. And there was a really interesting thing. There was the National Endowment for the Arts had just instituted in America a wonderful, wonderful grant program of small grants of $10,000 or less to very small arts organizations throughout the 50 states in small towns, in rural areas, and it was a competitive. There was a call for grants, and this was a vetting, and the NEA announced that 270 organizations nationwide would be given these grants. All they had to do was raise 10 on their own over a period of time, and this was a big thing because for a lot of the small nonprofits, if you're in South Dakota and Mississippi, in a rural area, this is kind of the entry in them to getting a sort of an institutional support that it would be so important for them. And smack dab on the middle, they just said, the NEA, they canceled the program, said you're not getting the money, even though you've even gone out to raise your own share. So we're limited by our bylaws, and this was what Andy said, by his will, to just the visual arts. So we went through the 270 grantees and found that 80 of them would be visual arts in one form or another. And we said, well, we're just going to give them the money that they didn't get. And then collaboration is important in these areas, so we did try to contact some other foundations, and the Frankenthaler Foundation was fantastic in responding. So Warhol and Frankenthaler got together, and we put up the money, and we gave the 80 visual arts ones the money flat out, and they didn't even have to apply for it. They didn't even know they were getting it. We already had the list from the NEA, who they were and everything, and we just sent them the check, and they were like, oh my God. And now we're trying to encourage some others. We're trying to now encourage some other foundations that aren't limited to the visual arts to try to step in for those involved in music, theater, dance, and all, to try to help them in the same way. That's one way we can do it. It's not enough, but it's something. And it also speaks for them in their own communities, that if we've done this for them, it helps them generate support in their own communities for what they're doing. It's like a sort of a seal of good housekeeping on it. So we keep looking for ways, as I say, to help in whatever way we can. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do what they're capable of doing. And that's what we want to encourage people, as well as just make the grants ourselves.
You talked earlier about the Artists at Risk and other initiatives, and this is really sticking your neck out as a foundation too. Do you feel that there's risks or fears in there?
Of course there is, but what previously I spent 30 years in political life. The number one weapon that is being used now is fear. They're using fear to stop it, to directly prevent people from doing what they're doing. We'll never know all the things that might have been done that aren't done because people were now afraid to do them. But fear has just permeated the culture. And the only way you can deal with you have to be able to publicly stand up and counter that. And we've seen examples. Columbia, as a university, gave in to fear. Harvard decided to fight it, and now people go Harvard. The first big law firm decided to give in and give what they wanted, and other law firms now said no, and the ones that said no have won in court so far, and the ones that said yes are the ones that are. So, but I will say this, we went to some foundations also that said what you're doing is a good thing, but we're kind of afraid. I understood that, but I think that, you go by example. So the fear is a component, and it's a very effective weapon that they've used.
And of course, there's also going to be a road ahead, because if they continue in this direction of challenging tax-exempt status, which is the lifeblood of organizations like yours, and taxes on endowments and so on that they're already starting to do, this will kind of create more obstacles in the process.
They're going to use every weapon they can, and resistance is about resistance, and I think things look at historically, things go from this way to that way. And right now it's bad, and it might well get worse, but it can also get better, and it only gets better if you make it better. And so the only thing you can do, and it's in the spirit of Warhol. I mean, right now, for example, politically in America, there's this horrific, cruel, demonic abuse of trans people, demonizing trans people and for political gains and all. Some of Andy Warhol's best art was like, Marsha Johnson and all the drag queens and all of the ladies and gentlemen. Great. He thought that was terrific. He made gorgeous and fabulous work from it. He celebrated. He said, so it's the spirit of Warhol to do these things. And he was first on a lot of things, and we're going to basically live and honor his legacy by extending it to the current time.
I think we're at time. I can't imagine a better way to end. Thank you, Joel. Thank you all.
Thank
and
you.
Colleen's coming back.